Good afternoon. My name is David Scotty Greenberger, and I'm here to talk about the influence of the Art Deco movement on automotive styling and automotive advertising. Okay, one of the things that we have to define first of all is exactly what is Art Deco. Art Deco started in Europe just before World War I, but it wasn't overly accepted at the time as a Art Deco program. It was just a sort of a pastiche or a mixture of many different types of art, particularly Cubism. Art Deco was influenced by the Egyptian designs, and in America they saw the influence by the Aztec designs in art. However, the name didn't come about until after World War I, and in 1925 they had an exhibition in Paris, and at that exhibition the name came about. Art Deco was influenced the design of buildings, furniture, jewelry, fashion, cars, movie theaters, trains, ocean liners, airplanes, and just about everything else that you dealt with, normal objects that were in your home, even if it was a refrigerator, an iron, or other appliances. Art Deco represents luxury, glamour, exuberance, and in faith in the social and technological process. Most people identified the Art Deco movement with rather wealthy people, and when they did advertising of cars, they always showed people in a car wearing a top hat or dressed formally. One of the first people who designed cars of the Art Deco nature was a man named Frangioni. He was from Italy, and he designed Roadster. What happened was he came from Italy to live in France, and in France he went to work for a coach builder as an apprentice. And then he went into World War I. When he came out, he decided he didn't want to work for anyone anymore. He wanted to work for himself, and he opened up his own coach building place. Now, what happened when I say coach building, you would go to a automotive builder, and you would buy a rolling chassis, and then you would take that rolling chassis or send it over to a coach builder from the manufacturer of the chassis, and you would sit down with the coach builder and say, what kind of design did you want? And most of them, they had particular designs that was in their favor, and then you would match that up with what you wanted to have. So if you wanted a certain thing, a certain design put into that design, you could have that, and he would build you a car. So just to give you an idea, okay, this is one of his cars. In 1938, he built a car called a Talbot Lago, which was what they call a teardrop coupe. And as you'll notice, it is nothing that was anything looking like any other car that was being built at the time. And that was what he was famous for doing. There's another simple design. This is Art Deco design. Now, what made it Art Deco? It made it very streamlined. It had beautiful curves to it. And the trim pieces, instead of being just straight pieces of trim, they had curves into the trim itself. One of the ideas of an Art Deco car design was to make the car look like it was moving even when it was standing still. And if you look at this car actually shows motion to it. The cars did not have a lot of the things that its predecessors had. To give you an idea about the predecessor, we have a typical car here. You need to get it. And this was a car that would be very boxy and square. Okay. And from that, it morphed into a design like this here. So you see the teardrop design, how nice and smooth it is. It's sleek, it's streamlined, and it's not anything that would be considered a boxy type of car. Again, here are two other pictures. This is the top one is a 1948. The bottom one is a 1936. So very similar in design, but also very fast looking, very sleek, very smooth, very streamlined. Now let's come to America, because that was in France. In America, right at the end of World War II, all the cars still had that boxy look to it, but slightly toned down. So you had something that looked like this here. Early in the history, you had a car You had cars that went from that boxy look to something which was approaching an Art Deco look. So you can get an idea of what the two, now this is within 2 years of each other in model design. Now, that was with Ford, which was making Lincoln at the time. Going back to our picture here, this was a Studebaker. So in 1946 and 46 or 47, Studebaker, which was an independent company in America, called on a man named Raymond Loewy, who was also from Europe. He was a French-born person who became an American citizen, and he designed cars. And this is, they did not want their car to look like a so-called notchback car. Okay? They wanted to be something different. Now, up for 1946, if you bought a 1946 car, you were really buying a car that had the design of 1941, and there were no cars produced from 41 to 46 in America, except for government purposes. So now here's a 1948 Studebaker, and if you look at it, it's totally different than anything that you have seen. And the interesting thing is, if people would say, this car looks like the back looks like the front looks like the back, and they interchanged it and they didn't know. But if you take something and you cover this here, take a look at that picture, just look at the back window, and it looks like an airplane. Why? Because this man, Raymond Loewy, also developed airplanes, or designed airplanes. So they used this same basic shape for a car until 1950, the end of 1952, in which case then he was working on, Raymond Loewy working on another car, Studebaker here. So basically he morphed from one thing to the other, always using the ideal designs from Art Deco. It was very smooth, very sleek. It looked like it wanted, this sort of like as a forward look, it wants to go that direction. And he basically did the same thing to here, to the car, the next car he had. Again, and they called him to do this car, which was a Studebaker Avanti. Again, more sleek, more streamlined, no bubbled fenders out. Now, take a look at the bottom car. The bottom car is a car called a Sunbeam. It happens to be my car, which I purchased in 1959, and I still have it. And this car was built as a four-passenger car, either two-door or four-door, and they couldn't sell the car. And they couldn't sell the car because the styling was back from the pre-war. So what they did, they came over to Raymond Loewy again, and they said to Raymond Loewy, and he had to go to England for this, what did we do to sell these cars? They had approximately 3,000 cars sitting there. And he said, well, the first thing you're going to do is to make a sports car out of it, or a roadster. Now, what did it mean by roadster? The roadster says that it has no roll-up windows, no top. And sure enough, they agreed to let him do that because they had all these cars sitting there and no one was buying them. So when he took the car, he had them remove the roof, remove the windshield, and with the two back seats, where the back seat was for two people, he had that removed and made the trunk, or the luggage compartment, a very long luggage compartment, and they called it a torpedo back. And in doing this, they redesigned the car, leaving everything that was in the front of the car, because the front, if you look at it with a high vertical grille, was Art Deco. The fenders, the way they would curve the fender, was Art Deco. The sculptor piece that's in there, which is very difficult to see unless you see the car, there's a sculptor piece in there, which again was Art Deco. So he had this beautiful front Art Deco car with a really bad looking rear, and by redesigning it and removing the roof and removing the back two seats and putting the torpedo back, he had a good looking car. And sure enough, they were able to sell the cars immediately. And the last year, 1955, they only sold 121 of them. And of the 121, there's only 21 of them left, and one of them is mine. And I enjoy the car very much. Next man who's very, very into Art Deco was a man named Harley Earl. Harley Earl, as far as I know, had only one job in his whole life, and that was working for General Motors. And General Motors, they made him in charge of design of cars, and he was called the father of the concept car. And as you see in the car here, he designed this car, but the influence of Art Deco is so in this car, because if you look at the horizontal chrome trim, or stainless steel trim in this case, you will see it has a flow to it. It continues from one part of the car to the next. If you look at the way the grill is vertical bars, and the only difference that he made on that grill is where they had very long vertical grills, they made it a shorter grill, but with vertical bars in it.
Okay.
So he designed this car, and if you know a little bit about cars, history of cars from the early 50s or late 40s, like 48, 49, you will see this type of Defender in Buicks and in Oldsmobiles, and this whole hood assembly is very similar to being Buick, Cadillac, Oldsmobile, and even Chevrolet, but on a shorter basis. And so that was the design. His concept car, they took a little bit from each thing. But again, Art Deco influence. Look at the back. The back is, again, like a torpedo back, and it comes down, and the taillights were built in for the first time. Otherwise, the taillights used to be hung on. On this car, if you notice, you don't see any headlights. The headlights are in little doors. The doors would flip up, and then you see the lights. And that, again, is an Art Deco feature to make it look sleek, streamlined. Look at the bottom car. The bottom car, Harley Earl also designed. And if you know a little bit about car design, you will see that this back is from Cadillac. The tail fin, again, the beginning of the tail fin era, Cadillac, and very, very similar. If you look at this pattern here, this became in the Corvette in 1957, 58, you'd see that. Okay, so Harley Earl was the major designer for General Motors. Harley Earl also designed this car. This was 1953. Look at that car. That car looks like it's in motion even though it's standing still. This car was made out of fiberglass. They only made it in 1953 in one color. Well, they were only white cars with red interior. That was the only way they made it. And the interesting thing was between the seats, there's only two passenger, between the seats, they had a piece of trim coming down and they called it the waterfall. Again, something that was Art Deco in design. But if you look at the way the back is on this, remember Harley Earl started the tail fin section. This again is like a miniature tail fin in a sports car. So they did this car out of fiberglass, and it was very, very successful. And of course, it's one of the most successful sports cars in the world today. Okay, now this car here is something that I'm very familiar with, and it's made by a man named Adolf Schneider. And Adolf Schneider was born in Poland, came to the United States, and moved to the Bronx. And that's where I met him for the first time. And I was, I guess, about maybe 6 or 7 years old. And his job was to fabricate the cabs for fire engines for the Mack Fire Engine Company. And as a little boy, I used to walk by his place. My mother used to take me to Bronx Park, and I would see that. And I always said, look at all the new fire engines. And every time I went by there was another fire engine. But he would build a cab for it, fabricate a cab. They would come up, pick it up, and then he'd bring them another one with a cab. So it was always nice. And then when I got to be a teenager, I decided to stop in to his shop and take a look at it. And what do I see? But I see this car. Now this car is something that he bought. It was originally a 1936 Stutz. And Stutz was an independent company. They were very famous for a car called Stutz Bearcat, but this wasn't the Bearcat. It was just a Stutz sedan. And he took it completely apart. And when I first saw it, it had no paint on it. It had no windows in it. And the trim was all brass, which he had chrome plated. And he designed that car. Notice the typical Art Deco grille with the vertical bars, very tall. The fenders that float around, and this car has stainless steel roof. And I watched him make the stainless steel roof. It was absolutely amazing to see him do that. And anyway, that car, it's a one car. It has never been anyone else, not another one built like that. And it still exists, and I believe it was just sold for $750,000. Okay, there's other pictures of it. So you have the back, the way the back is, the built-in taillights, and the interior was absolutely beautiful. The steering wheel was cast aluminum, so it was very, very different. Okay. Now, let's go to American cars with Art Deco influence. This is a Lincoln Zephyr 1939, and if you knew something about Ford cars, up until 32 they were very, very boxy. And in 33 and 34 they started to change their idea of how a car should look. And by 1938 and 39, you had, in 38 they started, actually the design started in 1937, and 39 they were able to produce the car. Again, the flowing fenders, look at how the headlights are. The headlights aren't even round, they're like a teardrop shape. And the headlights are built into the fender. Again, you have the tall vertical grille, and look at the way the back is shaped, so you get an idea of what they were looking for. It looks like it's in motion all the time. People did not like this car for the reason is that the hood looked like a coffin. So it was called a Coffin Nose car. Again, the concealed headlights, they would flip up. The tall, let's say front end, like the grille and part of it. The horizontal bars going around the car, over here and here. The exhaust for it came out the side. This car was the first production front-wheel drive car ever. Okay, the company did not make it through World War II. Right? The car below it, again, is a similar car, but this time they put a notch back on it. Okay, and this would be a fastback or torpedo back. This was a notch back. Obviously, this is for up to 5 passengers, and this was probably just for 2 passengers. Okay. Now, there's a company called Duesenberg. Duesenberg, when you bought a Duesenberg, you did not buy the car from Duesenberg. You bought the rolling chassis, and then you would go to a coach builder. Now, did General Motors use a coach builder? Yes, they used 2 coach builders. One was a body by Fisher. The other one was body by Fleetwood. Fleetwood was a company right here in Pennsylvania. So basically, all these 3 cars are the same cars underneath the rolling chassis. So somebody must have said, and these are all from the same year, 1936, so look at the difference in the design. This is truly Art Deco. The flowing of the lines, the curvature, again, look, it looks like in motion. The exhaust coming out the side of the hood. Then probably somebody who was an older person who said, I want a car like I used to have, and he brought it to the coach builder and said, build me this. Same year, quite a difference. They're very square back. But the influence of Art Deco in the trim design, in the radiator shell, or grille, which you call it, being very tall and vertical bars. Then, interesting thing, Art Deco started to come out with what they call a tubular grille. Tubular bumper. See, a tubular bumper in front, tubular bumper in the back. Somebody must have wanted like a sporty looking car. Again, like a roadster type car, no roll-up windows. Duesenberg, same thing, same year. So, but with the Art Deco flavor to it, the curvature coming down, the way the back was designed. Again, the tall vertical grille. Now, in 1934, Chrysler came out with a car that was amazingly Art Deco in design. Again, the tubular bumper, the big horizontal, rather big vertical grille, the skirted fenders. One of the things that's very interesting is that Chrysler came out with 2 cars 2 years apart, and that's how they looked. You had the Art Deco, the non-Art Deco. The design of the Art Deco Chrysler Airflow just about put them out of business. They sold very, very few cars at a time when they were just getting out of the Depression. Take a look at this car. This is a DeSoto, made by the Chrysler Corporation. Take a look at that car. Take a good look at it. Look at the way the front is. Look at the way the back comes down like that. Look at the way the rear window is. If it didn't have that bar there. Does anyone see any resemblance to it? Well, the resemblance to it is a Volkswagen Beetle. Okay? And which the design came only maybe 2 years or 3 years after they saw this came out. But very similar. And people would copy what other companies did. Again, this helped to almost put Chrysler out of business. Okay, now here's a car that was trying to look conventional at the time, but still had the Art Deco influence. The way the long flowing fender, all the way back. In other words, not just a little cap fender. And the torpedo back. And they started with a little bit of the way the light is, it almost looks like someone would say, oh, look, I have a little bit of a tail fin. But it was just a taillight that was bolted on. Okay, this is a car that had body by Fisher. This was the last notchback car made in America. Notice the notchback. And the 1949 Model 75. What's interesting about this particular car is this is the same car from 1939. They did not change the body. It's exactly the same. The difference between the 39 and the 38 was the 38 had their spare tire mounted in the fender. But then again, you can see there is an influence from the Art Deco because you had this fender, instead of the fender just ending here, right behind the wheel, they floated back into the car to give it a little bit of style. The grille again is bars, like the bumpers that were on other cars, and they did not bring it as high, so they shortened the grille. Okay, 1947 Chevrolet Fleetwood. This is a car that, again, look at the trim, the Art Deco style trim. It comes in from the grille all the way around. Headlights now are built into it. This car basically, from the front forward, is a car that you say from 1938-39, but from the back was changed. Of course, look at the fastback. The fastback it's not that long back, it's just brought in. And they sold very few of them. But the idea, the concept of this fast looking car with the Art Deco influence is there because of the laws and stuff. Okay, take a look at this. This is a 1948 Buick Streamliner. Again, notice, remember, we talked about streamline, so they called it a Streamliner. Again, the tubular grille, the tubular bumper, the vertical bars in the grille. So there's your Art Deco. This here is definitely Art Deco all the way around. And did they ever produce that car? No, it was a one-off concept car. And I believe it was destroyed by General Motors. Now, this is a car that was made in California called the Corsair. Notice that the skirted wheels, the covering over the wheels. You don't have that open wheel quarter panel or fender. Again, with a tubular bumper on both front and rear. Is that streamlined? I don't think you could get a car more streamlined than this. If you think about what this followed, if you know what a Porsche looks like, the early Porsches, very, very similar to that, except the Porsche was much smaller. Okay, this is a car that Ford came out with in 1934. Again, a Roadster. You didn't even have to open the door to get in. You could just step right in, even though there was a way to get into it better. Again, the high vertical grille. In this case, you don't really see bumpers on the car. Look at the way the headlights are mounted very low. This did not have Art Deco type fenders, but this trim pieces, the louvers, lends itself to saying Art Deco. And of course, the angle, the rake angle of the grille is Art Deco because it wants to look again like it's standing still, but being in motion at the same time. Okay, other cars. This is a Hispano Souza. This is a combination of Spain, Italy, and France. And this was a car I never saw one here in the United States. I don't know how many were built. But look at the door. The door opens from the front out. That's called a suicide door. And is that used today? Yes, on some of the very high-end cars now that they design, they have that type of door opening. When I showed you the picture of the Cadillac limousine, the rear doors were suicide doors on that. Again, look at the way the trim is. Look at that fender flowing all the way back. Art Deco. Okay, this is an interesting car. It's a Bugatti, and they call this a spine roof. You had a spine going up. Did it serve any real purpose? I don't think so. But it was a beautiful looking car from the back, ugliness from the front. But then again, Art Deco influence. The way the windows were designed, the way it came down, the sweeping lines, definitely Art Deco. Okay, here's a Peugeot from France. All right, I don't think this is a beautiful looking car, but interesting the way the design is. Again, the flowing lines, the type of grille, and the paint job lends itself to. There may not have been sculpture in the metal, but they painted it so it looked like a sculpture. Okay, this is a 1934 Packard. Now Packard was a high-end car, and they tried to do everything to keep the reputation of high-end up until 1936 and 37, where they came out with a lower priced car, and they went back to the previous design. So from this design, where you had this nice fastback, they went back to a notchback, and they did not keep the louvers in the hood, and they changed the whole front fenders. But this is their way of saying we can also build an Art Deco style car. Now, not only was the shape of the car Art Deco, but look at the door handles. This is just a sampling of some of the door handles. In this case, remember, one of the things that Art Deco said, when everything was made before, it was built in a particular shape, a form, and they said the form follows function. So if there was a bend in the metal or a crease in the metal, they'd say, well, that was put there for a reason. Now, form does not have to follow function, because you certainly didn't need all this artwork in the door handles. You didn't need the artwork in the way the grills were set up. Look at the headlights here. This headlight is totally different now. That headlight is a teardrop headlight. Why not a round headlight? Well, because now form does not have to follow function. Now it has to look aesthetically correct. Again, hood ornaments, or what they call radiator ornament or radiator cap, but now after that morphed into hood ornament. Look at the ones I have here. So you have here, this I know is from a Buick, I'm not sure, this is Cadillac, this is Cadillac. So there's some very interesting designs. Again, they're like jewelry. 1957 Chevy. The interesting thing about the 57 Chevy, they had this on the hood, but they had two of them. One next to each other, about maybe 2 feet apart in the center. This is, I believe, Oldsmobile. This is from a car called a Piazzaro. If you had to buy this piece today, it would be in the thousands of dollars. That is definitely a piece of jewelry if you think about it. This here, very unusual piece, is from a Nash Metropolitan. So I don't understand that Metropolitan would, which is a low-end car, why they would have something like that. And then these other two. This is from a Packard. I think this was the goddess of speed, they called it. Okay, on the inside, the dashboards, they call this waterfall. The steering wheel they call banjo wheel, this type of steering wheel. But if you look at this symmetry, there's good geometry, there's good symmetry, which makes up the good factors of Art Deco design. Now, does Art Deco affect cars today, 2020? Here it is, okay? So this is the new Bugatti. Again, it costs probably about $300,000, but if you don't see the Art Deco influence, look at this design. That just runs right through it. Rolls Royce, look at the way the back is, with like as if it was jewelry made back there, everything with beautiful trim. Look at the back of the car, again, that torpedo type back. So that's my presentation, and I just want to tell you I enjoyed doing this, and if anyone has any questions about cars, I will attempt to answer them. Okay? Thank you very much for coming.